What if the moment you thought you were saving lives was actually the moment everything spiraled beyond control? In a world where loyalty is nothing more than a fragile illusion, Nick and Adam take a step so dangerous it threatens to destroy not only their enemies, but themselves. Desperation pushes them into a ruthless gamble, buying betrayal, silencing conscience, and turning Reza Thompson into the key to a deadly game. But nothing comes without a price. As secrets unravel, the truth behind Matt Clark's twisted plan begins to surface, revealing a chilling reality far more brutal than anyone anticipated. Beneath the surface of this calculated move lies a storm of rage, guilt, and fractured trust. Nick is driven by panic and the fear of losing everything he loves, yet every decision drags him deeper into a moral abyss he cannot escape. Adam, cold and relentless, sees opportunity in chaos, but even he begins to sense that this game is slipping beyond his control. And at the center of it all, Reza stands on the edge of ruin, her betrayal not just a choice, but a point of no return that will haunt every second that follows. As the lines between right and wrong collapse, every character is pushed to their limit, forced to confront the darkest parts of themselves. What begins as a plan to outsmart a dangerous enemy quickly transforms into a psychological battlefield where no one is safe, and no decision is without consequence. Because in this story, survival isn't about winning, it's about how much of your soul you're willing to lose before it's over. In the end, there was no victory, only the echo of choices that could never be undone. The truth Reza revealed did not save them, it merely pulled back the curtain on a nightmare far more complex than any of them had imagined. Nick stood at the center of it all, consumed by a storm of guilt and fury that refused to quiet. Every step he had taken to protect Sharon and Noah had led him deeper into darkness, until he could no longer recognize the man he once believed himself to be. The line he swore he would never cross had vanished completely, replaced by a haunting realization that desperation had reshaped him into something dangerously close to the very enemy he was fighting. Adam, for all his calculated confidence, found himself facing a rare and unsettling truth: control was an illusion. The pieces he had so carefully arranged refused to obey, slipping through his grasp as chaos took hold. For the first time, the cost of his methods became impossible to ignore. This was not a game he could outmaneuver, not a battle that could be won through strategy alone. Beneath his cold exterior, a fracture began to form, small, almost imperceptible, but enough to threaten everything he believed about himself and the world. And Reza, she became the living consequence of betrayal. Neither side could truly claim her, and neither would ever fully trust her again. The weight of her decision followed her relentlessly, a shadow that grew heavier with every passing moment. She had chosen survival, but survival came at the cost of belonging, of identity, of any sense of certainty about who she was. In trying to escape destruction, she had ensured that it would live within her instead. Somewhere beyond their reach, the remnants of Matt's plan continued to unravel, leaving behind damage that could not be repaired. Sharon and Noah were no longer just victims, they were the silent center of a conflict that had spiraled far beyond its original purpose. What began as a rescue had transformed into something far more brutal, a collapse of trust, of morality, of everything that once held these lives together. As the dust settled, nothing felt resolved. The danger had not truly passed, it had only changed form. Each of them stood on the edge of a new reality, one shaped by the consequences they could no longer escape. There were no clean endings here, no redemption waiting just beyond the horizon. Only the quiet, suffocating understanding that some decisions do not lead to closure, they lead to a future where the damage continues to spread, long after the moment itself has ended. And in that silence, one truth remained unavoidable. The greatest threat was no longer the enemy they had been fighting, it was the darkness they had awakened within themselves. Nick had always believed there was a line he would never cross. It was a quiet conviction, something buried beneath years of family wars, betrayals, and desperate attempts to hold on to what little integrity remained in a world that constantly demanded compromise. But that belief began to fracture the moment Sharon and Noah disappeared. Panic didn't come all at once, it crept in, slow and suffocating, tightening around his chest until every rational thought was replaced by a singular, burning need: find them, no matter the cost. Adam, on the other hand, had never pretended to be bound by such lines. Where Nick hesitated, Adam calculated. Where Nick wrestled with guilt, Adam weaponized it. To Adam, morality was a currency like any other, valuable only when it served a purpose. And now, with Sharon and Noah's lives hanging in the balance, Adam saw an opportunity not just to act, but to prove that his way, his ruthless, unflinching approach, was the only way forward. Reza Thompson became the center of that plan. She had once been fiercely loyal to Matt Clark, drawn to his intensity, his vision, his dangerous charisma. Matt had a way of making people feel chosen, indispensable, as though they were part of something larger than themselves. For a long time, Reza had believed in that illusion. But belief began to rot from the inside the moment she realized how expendable she truly was. Matt's plans had grown darker, more erratic. His obsession with control had twisted into something unrecognizable, something that no longer resembled strategy but pure domination. Still, walking away was never an option until Nick and Adam forced one into existence. The offer wasn't just about money. It was about survival. About choosing which side of the inevitable collapse she wanted to stand on. The money was merely the surface, beneath it lay a silent threat and an even quieter promise: betray Matt, and you might live. Stay loyal, and you'll go down with him. Reza didn't accept immediately. The decision carved into her, splitting her sense of identity in two. Every memory of Matt's trust, every moment she had spent building his plans, now stood against the growing realization that he would sacrifice her without hesitation if it served him. The conflict hollowed her out. Loyalty had once defined her, but now it felt like a chain tightening around her throat. When she finally agreed, it wasn't triumph that filled the room, it was something colder, heavier. A point of no return. Nick watched her carefully as she began to speak, every word she revealed pulling him deeper into a reality he didn't want to face. The details of Matt's plan were worse than he had imagined. Sharon and Noah weren't just being held, they were leverage. Pawns in a larger game designed to force a confrontation that Matt believed he could control. The location, the contingencies, the traps layered within traps, it was all meticulously constructed, leaving little room for error. And yet, even as the information poured out, Nick felt no relief. Instead, anger surged through him, raw and uncontrollable. Not just at Matt, but at himself. At the fact that it had come to this. That he was standing there, complicit in buying someone's betrayal. Trading one moral failure for another in the desperate hope it would lead to something better. Adam, in contrast, felt a different kind of satisfaction. Not joy, not even relief, just confirmation. This was how the world worked. Pressure, leverage, decisive action. Reza's betrayal was proof that everyone had a breaking point, and that finding it was the key to winning. But even Adam wasn't immune to the tension creeping into the edges of the situation. Because Reza knew too much. Not just about Matt, but now about them. About the lengths they were willing to go. And people like Reza didn't simply disappear into silence. They carried their choices with them, and those choices had a way of resurfacing when it mattered most. As the plan to rescue Sharon and Noah began to take shape, the fractures between Nick and Adam widened. Nick wanted precision, caution, something that minimized risk, that preserved whatever humanity they still had left. Adam pushed for speed, for aggression, for striking before Matt could adapt. Every disagreement felt like a countdown. Each second bringing them closer to a confrontation that would demand more than either of them was prepared to give. Meanwhile, Reza found herself trapped in a different kind of prison. The moment she chose to betray Matt, she lost any illusion of safety. She could feel it in the silence that followed her confession, in the way Nick's anger lingered just beneath the surface. In the calculating distance in Adam's eyes. She had traded one master for another, one danger for a different kind of uncertainty. And somewhere out there, Matt was still in control. Or at least, he believed he was. Because what none of them could fully grasp yet was that Matt had anticipated the possibility of betrayal. Not the specifics, not Reza herself, but the inevitability of weakness. He had built redundancies into his plan, safeguards designed to activate if anything went wrong. The information Riza had given them was accurate but incomplete. The realization came too late. By the time Nick and Adam moved, by the time they committed fully to the path they had chosen, the situation had already begun to shift. The location wasn't what it seemed. The traps weren't where they were expected. And Sharon and Noah were no longer just hostages, they were bait in a game that had evolved beyond anyone's control. Nick felt at first the unmistakable sensation that everything was slipping. The anger that had driven him now turned inward, morphing into something heavier, more dangerous. Regret. Doubt. The crushing awareness that every decision he had made, every compromise, might have only made things worse. Adam, for the first time, hesitated. Not outwardly, not in any way that could be easily seen, but internally. A flicker of uncertainty broke through his certainty. Because this wasn't just about control anymore. It was chaos, unpredictable and expanding, and even he couldn't calculate every outcome. And Riza, caught between the past she had betrayed and the future she had gambled on, realized the full weight of her choice. There was no side to hide behind anymore. No version of events where she emerged untouched. She had set something in motion that couldn't be undone, and now she was just another piece on a board that was collapsing under its own complexity. The walls closed in on all of them in different ways. Nick, suffocated by guilt and rage. Adam, grappling with a loss of control he refused to acknowledge. Riza, consumed by the consequences of her betrayal. And somewhere in the shadows, Matt remained the architect of a disaster that was only just beginning to unfold. In the end, there were no clean victories waiting. Only choices layered upon choices, each one darker than the last, each one pushing them further from the people they once believed themselves to be.